Welcome back to the channel. My name is Steven. I'm a pharmacist and I own 52 units of real estate. So I had a great question in the comments asking about what are my living expenses as I went on to my 11-year wealth building journey. And at a high level, I started off every living situation possible. I rented a room, I lived at home for free, I house hacked, I was renting an apartment, and now I'm living in my own primary residence, which I'm not house hacking. So let me kind of share what my income was relative to what my expenses were and how that kind of changed over time to give you a context. Because how I basically bought most of my real estate, or all my real estate to be honest, is I focus on increasing my income, keeping my expenses as low as possible. And the biggest expense is your living expenses. So I try to keep that as low as possible despite building up a high income W-2, despite building up a net worth. And it's that delayed gratification is what helped set me up today 11 years later. So it's almost like 11 years of delayed gratification until I'm living in my primary residence that I'm not house hacking currently, and am choosing not to house hack as of right now, just to have more privacy and to have my own space to really call home. So let's backtrack all the way to 2013. I graduated pharmacy school. My first job paid me $55 an hour, which is about typical for pharmacists back then. So I was making roughly about $120K, and I was taking home about $5,000. And I was renting a room for about $500 a month. So it was a 2-bedroom apartment, and basically the master bedroom the person lived in, I lived in the second bedroom, so we had a shared bathroom, and then there was a kind of someone staying in the living room too. So that helped kind of lower some of my expenses a little bit, but I just paid a flat $500 a month. So if you look at my spread there, I was taking home about $5,000, and I spent $500 on my living situation. It worked out because the tenant and the master, she was a nurse, so she worked 12-hour shifts. She was actually night shifts, and so I never saw her. We were reverse schedule, and on the weekends when she was off for 3 days or 4 days, she would just go back up to the Bay Area. And then for myself, I would be there pretty much Monday through Friday, and Friday I would drive back home to the Bay Area. So it worked out, and realistically, the tenant that lived in the living room, he had the most alone time. And it was just a great way to live. I was used to living like a poor college student and room sharing and not having privacy, so it worked out. So summarize, from 2013 and 2014, I took home about $5,000, and my living expenses were about $500, which is 10% of my take home. So in 2015 to 17, I essentially lived at home. And at that time, I think I was making about $160K. And I think my take home was roughly about $8,000. And my living expenses was zero. So I went from $500 to zero. And as you can see, my income went up by $3,000, and my living expense decreased by $500. So now I have this huge spread of $3,500 a month extra between my increased income and my decreased expense to be able to save up to pay off my student loans faster. And that's exactly what I did, right? So my only expense really was whatever I ate out, whatever I did on my free time, and it wasn't that much. It might have just been like at most $2,000, $1,000 to $2,000 depending on the month. And let's just say it's $2,000. I still had $6,000 spread that I could allocate towards investments, allocate towards saving for a home. So living at home, not the most convenient. You do have to follow the rules of your parents. You have to do what they say. They treat you like a kid, but it's a great way to save up money to buy a house, a great way to save up money to pay off student loans. Very common in Asian American households and communities to do that. So if you have that privilege and the ability to, it's a great way to lay a strong financial foundation for yourself. So I did this from 2015 to 2017. In 2017, towards the end of 2017, that's when I bought my first home. Because I was able to live at home and my income went up, my expenses went down, I was able to save up more money. So I saved up a 10% down payment to buy my first home in Livermore, California. So this house was $800,000. I put 10% down, so some closing costs as well. So let's just say I put in roughly $90,000 that I was able to save because I lived at home, because I didn't have rent, and because even before that I was only paying $500 to rent a room. So I kept my living expenses very low. I think when I was in college, in pharmacy school, I was paying about $500 a month to rent a 2-bedroom apartment that was shared with a roommate, and it was pretty cheap. So from there, obviously now that I own this house, I have a mortgage and it's gonna be more expensive. So my mortgage was $3,000 and my property tax, insurance, everything else about $1,500 a month. So I actually house hacked this property, which means I lived in the master and rented out the 3 other bedrooms. The 3 other bedrooms I rented for $1,000 each. So it gave me $3,000, which essentially covered my mortgage, which covers the principal and interest payment. So my expense was $1,500 a month to live in this house. But realistically, if you factor in the principal pay down, it was almost free, but it's a forced savings account. So I was paying $1,500 a month, but I was essentially paying it to myself in a way. So, but we can still call it $1,500 in expense. And at this point, I was taking home about maybe $9,000 a month, and my living expense was $1,500. House hacking, but if you factor in the principal pay down, I'm essentially paying myself, so it's a forced savings account. It's principal that's going back to me. So I'm kind of paying myself, but for the sake of the example, $1,500, $9,000 take home. So once again, have a very decent spread of $7,500, which I could use to invest and use to save for my next house. So in 2017, 2019, this was kind of my situation. In 2019, the middle of it, I got another job that paid about $210K. And so now at this point, I'm taking home maybe $10,000. And from here, I bought another property that I house hacked, 10% down. So I bought for $1.1 million in San Francisco. And it had a lower unit, which was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, upper unit, which was a 3-bedroom, 1.5-bath. And what I did was I put 10% down, which is about $110K. And back then, this is low interest rates. I rented out the bottom unit to 4 college students for about $2,800, including utilities, including internet. And in the upper unit, I lived in the master bedroom and rented out the 2 other bedrooms for $1,200 each. So roughly that's $2,400 upstairs, $2,800 downstairs. So I collected about $5,400, I believe. So that $5,400 roughly was enough to cover my mortgage. So once again, it covered my principal and my interest payment. So once again, I was just paying the property tax, the insurance, the utilities, the internet, and any repairs. So that came out to be roughly about $1,500 as well. So house hacked the second time, my living expense was $1,500, but I was taking home about $10,000. So I have $8,500 spread a month now. So as you can see here, my living situation kind of stayed the same, and then the expenses kind of hovered, but essentially once again, I'm paying myself. So in 2020, at this point, I relocated to Southern California, and this time I wanted to have my own space, my own privacy, so I actually rented out an apartment, which I rented for about $2,200 a month, all in. And I think I took a pay cut a little bit, so I was taking home about $9,000 a month. So if you look at it, I was spending $2,200 in rent, $9,000 in gross take-home income or net take-home from W-2, and then my rental properties, for the most part, my first one was a little bit cash flow negative, about $200-$300, which I was self-managing it, and that is a factor in repairs. And then my SF property was cash flowing roughly about $800 a month. So at this point, I'm building a decent equity. So I did that situation for about 1.5 years, and then once again, I relocated again, and took home about roughly $8,000. because when I relocate to Southern California, it's a pay cut typically because they pay less. It's a cheaper cost of living. And because I took that, $30,000, $40,000 pay cut, and my living expenses went up, my margin was a little bit less. But at this point, I'm dating my girlfriend, who's now my fiance, so it worked out. And it's okay, right? I delayed gratification, and why not? Why not enjoy the apartment living experience? So from there, I was in my next place where I rented a studio for about $2,200 a month. It was like oceanfront in Santa Monica, and my take home was roughly about $8,000. And this is when I owned a bunch of like real estate, right? And it wasn't cash flowing just yet because I was renovating the property, stabilizing them. And so my savings went down a lot. And now I'm taking home roughly about $12,000 a month. And I bought a house. So we put 5% down, and our total monthly cost is about $7,000 a month right now, including everything. Once HOA kicks in, because we got HOA prepaid for a year for us, it's gonna be about $7,500. But technically I split it between me and my fiance, so it's roughly about $3,700 a month. But I take home about $12,000 a month. And if you factor in my real estate income now, it does cash flow about $10,000, assuming no major expense. So I'm paying $3,700 a month for this property to live in here. And I take home $12,000, and my rental income is another $10,000, so about $22,000 a month. So relatively the margin, it's still not too bad. So that's kind of my income relative to my living expenses over the past 11 years. Obviously, I know a lot of people are going to say that spending $7,500 a month is a lot on a mortgage, and I agree. I completely agree. But we only put 25% or 5% down. There's some PMI, and we have a 6.5% interest rate. So we're hoping whenever interest rates drop over the next 2 years, we can refinance to a lower rate and then hopefully make the payment more reasonable. Or, which I've been saying a lot in my other videos, is I can sell a property, take that equity, and then use that to pay off this house, which would essentially wipe out $5,500 a month in mortgage. And then it would lower our expenses to $2,000 a month to live here, which is just property tax, which is just insurance, which is just HOA, which is just utilities. And from there, it would be $2,000 between us two, so $1,000 each. So imagine me taking home $12,000 and my living expenses $1,000. I have $11,000 a month in margin. So hopefully you found value from this video. If you're looking to buy multifamily real estate with some guidance, check out the mentorship program. Otherwise, let me know what questions you have. Let me know how you are trying to reduce your living expenses. And please like, comment, subscribe, and share this video with somebody. Thank you so much. Hope to see you in the next one.